Hello and welcome back to Backyard Adventures with Andy. We're talking about dahlias today and what to do with them over the winter. Should you leave them in the ground? If so, any tips on that? And then especially digging them up. Why do you dig them up? How do you dig them up? Just some tips about storing them and getting them ready for the next year. And then I have some footage also from what I did last year as I was taking them out of storage and getting them planting. So I'll kind of show you a little bit about that. So hopefully this video will be productive and helpful for you as you consider what to do with them over the winter. So enjoy. Alright, so we're back for the video today and we're going to be talking about these dahlias. I've got several behind me. There's some taller ones. I've got some little ones back here. All throughout the yard there's a lot of different dahlias. And in my particular case, I've been growing dahlias for a number of years. I started my dahlias, let's see, it was probably 6-7 years ago is when I first started really getting into it. So the peach and the red ones were, I think, some of the original ones I had. Most of the ones I had from that first year, though, actually died off. I grew them, they did well that summer, they're beautiful, and then wintertime, I thought, okay, just like a lot of other bulbs, I'll leave them there, and came back the next spring. I had a couple that shot up, but the majority, and I don't remember if I had like 12 of them or what, but I would say a quarter to a third of them survived. The rest of them never popped up. And I went and started digging around and I found some remnants, some rotted remnants of the tubes, the tubulars, those dahlias. They rotted out, died out, whether it was too cold or just too wet or the combination. And so that next year I went and got some more bulbs, picked them up and planted them and dug them up and put them in some storage that winter, and every single one that I planted or that I stored, every single one was successful in coming back. In fact, I divided them up and I had like 3 times as many bulbs. I ended up throwing some away, gave them away, and it's been successful every year. Now every once in a while I'll have one that might rot a little bit. I'll talk about that in a bit, but I would say it's like 95% success rate by digging these things up, and it really isn't that much work. Right now it's a little early to actually dig these things up. I'll continue on with the video talking about that, but it's mid-October and we still have like upper 70s, even 80 degrees. It's an unusually warm fall for us up here in the Pacific Northwest. So these things are still kicking out flowers left and right and doing well. But soon we're going to see the weather shift. It's going to get colder, start getting our first frost, and these things are just going to be done. They'll quickly die off, brown, fall over, and at that point that's when you dig them up. So I've still got a little bit of time to enjoy them, but I'm going to show you kind of the process and talk about that. Let me pause for a moment and just talk about instead of digging them up, leaving them in the ground, leaving your dahlias in the ground. That's a good option if you live in a spot where it doesn't get too extreme cold. So one thing, I'm not sure the exact temperature, but what I've heard is when the dahlias are in a freezing area and it gets below 20 degrees or it gets in the low 20s and below, you'll kill them and they're done. So in my particular area up here in the Northwest, we don't get that cold very often, and when we do get into the 20s, it's kind of a rare thing. So for my dad, one of the things he's done is he likes to keep them in the ground, not go through that work of digging them up, and he's done that for most of the years, the last few years with his dahlias. And he does lose a couple per year, a few of his dahlias, but overall he's had some luck where he will take mulch and stack it over there as the fall is wrapping up and as the winter's coming, they die back. He'll put a big load of mulch on top of it and kind of protect it from the cold temperatures. Now, it doesn't fully protect it from the moisture, but if you've got well-draining soil and you got that mulch on there, you know, I think you have more favorable odds for it surviving. In my ground, I've got some pretty wet soil where certain spots don't drain real well, or I get a lot of rain, and I just haven't had the luck with that. So it is an option to leave it. Maybe you test it out and see how that goes for you, but in my particular area, not so much because of the cold, but more because of my moisture and some of the concerns with that, I just prefer to dig them up. Now, one other thing about digging them up, instead of leaving them in the ground, is that it's not just about saving them, but a lot of times as you see them grow and how they work in your yard, the height, how broad they are, even the color, you want to reposition them. And I like to dig them up partly so I can reposition them, kind of play around with where things are at. And I do mix my dahlias up in different spots. Sometimes I have a couple tall ones like these behind me, and then I'll have some short ones, or kind of stagger them different places. So by digging them up, it gives you that opportunity after you've seen them grow for a year to be like, oh yeah, next year I want to do something different, or I want to mix it up or whatever. So that is another benefit of it. So one tip I did want to mention before you dig them up, and this is actually something to do while they're still growing, is I would highly recommend with, if you've got your dahlias in pots, or like in my case, I've got there's probably 10 behind me, different colors, different heights. I would highly recommend, get your cell phone out, get a video camera, even pictures works, but I would go and just videotape yourself talking, walking through your yard or your dahlias, your plants, and just make note of kind of where they're at, what color they are, the size of the bulbs, how tall they get, how wide they get, spacing, things you learned from this year, but kind of keep track of that. And that way when you go to dig them up, you know, because usually when you dig them up, a lot of times they've already died off, the flowers aren't there. That way you can remember where things are at. You can be like, okay, this is a yellow bulb, or whatever the Lady Darling or whatever the thing is. This is a red dahlia that gets 6-7 feet tall, and you can kind of plan those so you can separate those. You dig them up and you can keep them labeled, get them all ready, because a lot of times when you go to label them, you're going to be writing on the tubular, and there's no way to know what it was back in the growing season. So just a little tip: get your camera out, go out and walk around the yard, talk to yourself, so you can go back and watch that as you're storing your dahlias, and it helps me. Maybe it'll help you. All right, as you go to dig up your dahlia, you're going to end up with the tubulars on the bottom, kind of the life of this plant, and then you got all the, usually it's going to be the dead part of the flower here. Now I went and had a pot of these that were over in the yard, some of my extra bulbs, so I thought I'd show you this before we dig them out so you can see what we're digging up. But, oh, I just broke this. So this will work. You can see here, I've got a couple small little tubulars, and there's going to be an eye or two. So this actually, I could go and cut this off and take off the flower, cut this right here, and this would be just fine for a new flower for next year. So that's how small they could be. But typically, when you're digging these things up, you're going to end up with something like this, where you've got a bunch of these just tubulars that are kind of hanging off. It looks like just a bunch of fingers. You got the roots, some dirt, and so afterwards you'll go through, clean these up, dry them up, get them ready. But when you dig them up, you want to be real careful, because these things can fall off real easy. You will lose some in the digging process. They're not on there super tight. So you're gentle with them, but you want to keep several of those. And then there's the eye, the top of it, which is where the flower grows. And you have to have the eye and these tubes for it to grow. If you break these off and you just start throwing them around, unless they have the tubes, they're not going to grow. But you can see here, I got the body here. This is where all the storage and food supply for it is. And then up here, there's several of these little bumps. Those are the tubes. So I could actually cut this thing in a couple ways, and this clump right here would be just fine for a flower for next year and to do fabulous. Or I could keep it as one giant one and have a real healthy plant, but a lot of people will divide these about every, oh, I don't know, 3 years or so. I divide them often. When they start getting big, like this is probably good for a year, but if they get too big, I'll cut them up, divide them up, and let them have plenty of room to grow. So this is what you're digging up. You gotta be real careful. So you kind of, you can get a pitchfork, a shovel, you're gonna go down and you just gently raise them up, kind of lightly shake the dirt off. And then as that dirt and the weight gets off of there, it's a little easier to move them around. But if there's a lot of weight, you can end up breaking those off. So let's go dig one up. And again, you can dig them up now. You can see these things are ready to go. But with there still being flowers on your bulbs, enjoy them while you can. If you have a weekend that's free and you're like, okay, I'm gonna dig them up now, that's fine. But most people go and wait till the cold weather comes, these are starting to die off, then they dig them up. But it might be wet, might as well do it while it's dry, right? All right, let's go dig some up. All right, so here's an example. I've got this, this dahlia here. There's the stem that goes down, so I know I've got my tubular right here. And I've been kind of tying this up to my fence here. But not knowing how far out the tubes are, I'm just gonna come out and just try to get underneath them. They're typically less than a foot deep. You'll get, your roots might go a little deeper, but I'm just gonna start gently shaking these. There you go. Got my string still tight on there. Okay, this is a real good example of a typical dahlia tubular. I've got a couple parts that don't look quite as healthy. Those will get cut off later. That was probably something from last year or something that rotted off there, but lots of good healthy storage for next year. And I don't need any of this, so I'll get my clippers and just come through and cut this. But this is what you're looking for, and this will be a good one for next year. I could probably cut this into 2 or 3 and have some new flowers if I wanted, or I could just plant this and have a nice mature plant ready to go. All right, so I've got several of these that I've dug up that we'll use for today, and these are all from that yellow kind of ball-like dahlia. And this is probably one of my best examples. Just a big giant bunch of tubes in here. And I'm gonna go ahead and start by getting the big part off, get rid of that. That'll all go in the compost bin. But I've got my dahlia for next year. Now, this is just useful as a handle. I can kind of hold that without breaking things. And I'll keep this handle on here while I go spray things off. And then I'll go ahead and cut these down a little bit more. But I don't mind having a little bit of a stump on there. It's kind of it is helpful as a handle later on. And then before I plant these, I might go through next spring and just bring these down all the way, depending on how big that is. But this is ready to go. In fact, it's really not that dirty. A lot of times if I've got if I've had a lot of moisture recently, if it's been kind of muddy, if I've maybe watered and a bunch of the dirt is stuck in there, I'll go through and kind of laser through and just kind of get all that dirt off of there. But this really isn't that bad. I'm not really worried about rot with this one. This is actually kind of fascinating. Look at this one here. So lots of good examples of the eyes. Got an eye right there, there's an eye. Those are all viable eyes for next year. So I could actually divide these up in a couple ways, and as long as I've got an eye attached to the tubular there, or maybe a couple of those, that'll do really well. But what's kind of interesting about this one is there's another one that kind of started up here. I could cut my stem off like I'm gonna do. And this big one's ready to go, but this is actually viable here also there's an eye right there and there's a small tube. So if I was desperate to keep this one, I could definitely do that. I've got a lot of this, so I don't think I'll keep that, but anyway, kind of interesting to see. Even if you just have one or two little tubes and you have an eye, that thing still could be viable, so no sense throwing it out. All right, so after cutting these, kind of shaking off the big dirt, I like to take the hose and I'll just go through and spray these, get kind of the dirt or the clumps of mud that's kind of jammed in there, get that out so it's pretty clean. And that's just to help avoid rotting in the cool temperatures. If there's too much moisture in there, it's more prone for the rotting and just the problems of this thing not coming back. So honestly, I would actually not spray this one if it wasn't for this video. This is pretty clean. There's hardly anything on there. Maybe I'll go dig up one and see if I can find one that's looking pretty gross. But this one's ready for storage. All right, here's one more that I just dug up, another one of these yellow balls, and this one has just a big clump of dirt, you can see. And I went ahead and already cut off the stems there, and I'm using that as my handle. I'm just kind of gently shaking this off. It's pretty dry dirt, so a lot of it's just falling off, but I'm gonna wanna get that hose in there and just spray off the big clumps of this dirt and get this thing nice and clean, so it's more like that versus this. So let's go get the hose out and I'll show you what I do. All right, so I've got my dahlia all sprayed off, and gotta continue to work on the rest of them, but it's fairly clean. You know, there's all the big pockets of dirt and mud and stuff is out of there. I'm gonna let this thing sit on a table for at least a day, dry up, maybe 2 days, but just give it a day or two, and start to kind of dry paper on the outside, kind of that potato-y look, and then I'll package these things up and put them in a nice cool place for the winter and let them just sit, and they will be ready to go for next spring. So put them on a table, let them go for a day or so. I don't want this necessarily getting rained on. I want it to dry, so depending on your temperatures, you can put them under cover or wherever, but should be good till tomorrow. And then I did want to also show you real quick. This is the one that's not sprayed off. This is the one that is. Now this is still a little bit wet there from the water, but you can see if you dig them up at the right time, you may not have to do much spraying. Just shake them off and they're pretty well ready to go. So maybe you time your weather situation so you can dig them up before it gets really moist. All right, it's the next day. These things have dried out. You can see in here, kind of looks like a potato like you get in the store. Kind of a rough paper feel on the outside. You don't see any big drenched areas, nothing soggy in there. And these are ready to go. So my tried and true method for me personally, and it's been very successful year after year, is I've actually just stored these things without anything extra in plastic bags, loosely in there. And so this is not necessarily like you go out and watch videos, watch how people do it. They do talk about, you know, some people talk about storing them in plastic, but you want to be careful it's not too tight or too damp in there where it can get mold. I've had great luck year after year just taking these bags, dropping in several of them, and setting them in a cool, dark place for the winter. So that's how I've done it. Now you'll see people talk about storing them in, perlite is probably the one I see the most common. I don't really want to spend the money on getting bags of that, but people will reuse it year after year, but they will kind of put it in a container such as this. They'll take the perlite, drop it in there, and kind of sprinkle it around it, stack some more on there. So that's an option, and I think it would work well. The perlite, typically they get that moistened down first. They'll put a light watering on it and then put it down just to make sure there's some moisture in there. And that's kind of one of the go-to ways that people talk about it online. I've never done that. I think it would work, but there's the cost of buying it, and what I have works, so I wanted to share that with you. The other one, and this is one I want to do a little experiment. Maybe I'll make a video this year and test it out, do like all three and see which has the best luck. But take bark, so not necessarily fine bark, but kind of this is a very coarse bark. Just like the perlite, I'd water it down and store it the same way. This is a lot cheaper. I've got this for free all over the place, or I can get it really cheap. And this is another option that would help keep some moisture, but not keep it drenched in there. So, and then in the spring, you basically take the bark, take the perlite, kind of shake it off, and go at it from there to plant them. So again, my method: take the plastic bag, open it up, and drop all of these in there. If I have a variety that I want to make sure I have protected, so I have at least one of them going, if I have a very small amount of something, I would actually put them in two separate bags, so if one happened to mold or rot and spread to the other ones, it wouldn't be an issue with the others. Now, with that said, for the last 5 years I've been doing this, and I've had great success. Every once in a while there'll be something that will shrivel a little bit too much, or maybe one of the tubes will start rotting a little bit, but it's so minimal. So I pretty much, once they're dried out, set them in here, and so forth, tie them up. In fact, this particular material I use is very thin. I might have a hole that pops in there. I don't even worry about that. And then I would take these and set them in my container, or just set them directly on a shelf, and they'll be good to go for the winter. All right, so I am down here in my crawl space, root cellar, my little storage area that I kind of built for storing things. And I could also do this in my shed or my garage. Both of those places would probably just work out just fine. But down here, I flip the light switch, and it's pitch black. Stays nice and cool typically during the winter, and dry and all that. So, but there's a little bit of humidity under here, just being with where it's at. So what I like to do is I like to actually just store it in here, and the last several years I've had just put them up along the walls here, kind of on top of this plastic, and it's worked just fine. I've been collecting these different storage containers that I'll use this year just to kind of keep things separated or whatever, but it doesn't matter. The key is, in all my past years, I've just taken this plastic bag, tied it up here, and just set it up here, and then pulled it out in the late winter, early spring to start figuring out the growth. So that's the gist of how I store these. I forgot one thing. Let me just insert that here. Labeling, marking what your different dahlias are. So as I go to store them, one of the things I do is I take a permanent marker and I write on maybe two of the different little tubes, little body parts. I'll write either a code or the color, what it is, so that if for some reason things get mixed up, I can just remember what these are. And so that's one thing, whether you put a tag in there, label the bag, if you have them in a box or whatever, have some sort of way to label what they are, so next spring when you go to pull them out, you can be like, okay, these are all the yellow ones, and you can know the height and how wide they go and all that. So don't forget to mark them. That'd be pretty frustrating if you had all these different kinds of bulbs down there and they all look the same. And I guess you get a surprise that way. So anyway, forgot about that. Hopefully that helps. You can divide now, or you can wait till the spring. Sometimes if you wait till the spring, the eyes have bulged a little bit more. It's easier to see. But you could really do it either time, and you're basically, and you'll lose several of these, the bottom parts, the body, the tube, you'll lose some of these as you're cutting them, and that's totally fine. You just want to make sure you've got at least one of those attached to the eye for that to be a viable plant. So you got the eye, you got kind of the neck, which is kind of the connecting part to the body, and so I could go through here and just slice this. I've got eyes on 2 different parts. Cut that, and I've got now 2 very nice ones that could be healthy to go. This thing here, I've got plenty of this type of flower, so I'm not going to worry about cutting these up, but I can come back in the winter or in the spring and do that. So with this, because I've got this container with the lid, I could actually just, I didn't even need the plastic bag. I could just throw this on there and go. I'm going to be separating them, put them in here, and leave them there. I got one other video that this is actually same concept as this, but I took this from the spring. So after I pulled the bags out, and let me show you what they would look like a few months from now. So it's kind of the same thing, but going back, what is it, 6 months or whatever, 8 months back to when I pulled these out. So check this out, and if you got questions, leave those in the chat. I'll try to answer those as soon as I can, and hopefully this is helpful for you. All right, this is the peach dahlia. A couple bags of these. You can see roots are already kicking out, ready to grow. Well, again, if you have any questions about how to store dahlias and any of the problems along the way you've had, if you've got other opinions on this, please throw it in the comments. It's helpful for me. I'm actually learning from that, and I find that other people read the comments, the questions. I'll try to answer those as much as I can and make it kind of a learning community at the same time. So anyway, thanks so much, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good life.